Welcome to Global Bible Study, brought to you by World Christianity from Brazil Adventist University. In this episode, we'll be studying about sharing the story of Jesus.
Hello, in this episode, Marianna, an education graduate and a theology student at Brazil Adventist University, is my co-host.
And to discuss about sharing the story of Jesus, we welcome Dr. Dioi Cruz. Having been a missionary in Africa, Dr. Dioi is currently a professor at US in the Philippines. Hadassa Marques, an English teacher who has lived in Thailand for 2 years as a missionary, and Lucas Moreira, who has volunteered in the United States and Paraguay and currently works at Hope Channel Brazil.
Welcome everybody. We're glad you have joined us for another episode of Global Bible Study. This is our episode number 11. We have been discussing about making friends for God with people from many different countries. Our topic for today is sharing the story of Jesus, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the discussion once again. I want to ask Dr. Dioi about a very interesting Bible verse that shows how important the story of Jesus is in anybody's life, anyone who actually receives Jesus into his life, his or her life. And that is Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. So what were we like before we knew Christ? And how about after we know Christ? What is the difference?
Yeah, that's a very interesting understanding when we start our Christian life. In fact, we have to know 3 different phases in our growth. What we were before, and then what changed us, what made those changes, and then who am I today? So the Bible says that before meeting Jesus and being transformed by him, in Ephesians it says we are dead in trespasses, in sins. So in other words, we were living or walking in life according to the course of this world. And now there is a change. Now, there is something interesting about this change, about this transformation. We often don't see in ourselves this happening. We will see other people telling us how we have changed. And that's the wonderful thing about this transformation. It doesn't make us feel proud of ourselves. Other people will appreciate it and help us to have a self-awareness of this power of transformation.
Yeah, I like verse 10 specifically, where it says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." Just the idea of handiwork, the idea of God really carefully crafting our spiritual lives. This is really an amazing illustration, I think. Now, I'm thinking, Lucas and Hadassa, how has your life changed because of Christ? Can you share maybe some insights or something that happened to you, or how you see yourself, or maybe in the lives of other people, how Christ really transforms one's lives?
Well, I can say that God transformed a lot my life since I decided to live just for him. I believe before I would really have thinking to live for the world, right? I mean, to earn things from here, maybe live more for myself, and think about myself. But after I really decided to live for Jesus. So I think I just think about serving Him through other people, so I can help other people. I think more about this, just serving Him.
I've been in church since I was a kid, so there is no big transformation in my life. But every day you learn something new that implies in micro transformations that impacts on how you live your life and how do you treat people, how you worry about things, and how do you behave in stressful situations, and how you're not worried about something that's going on. So these are things that they may show people a little bit of God in you, because you're not behaving like everyone else. You're behaving differently, and this is a way for people to acknowledge Jesus through you.
So the study guide says, and this is an interesting quote from Ellen White, that the exercise of force is contrary to the principles of God's government. He desires only the service of love, and love cannot be commanded, cannot be won by force or authority. Only by love is love awakened. So we have shared about how Christ has changed our lives and transformed who we are, and this is a lifetime process. Now, we also want to think about how our story can now be shared and how we can reflect the love of Christ for us to other people, and the impact, the effect that this can have on other people's lives. Have you seen this transformation while working as a missionary, Dr. Joy?
Yes, sure. By the way, going to the mission is the right place where we see transformation happening. And this is wonderful to see the power of God. And by the way, some people are changed faster than others, right? It all depends, as you said, love makes the whole thing. People who love more, they go faster. People who love less, they go slower. It's proportional. And what's interesting is that this is a never-ending transformation. You don't come to a point and say, oh yes, now I'm the one. Jesus, when he came back after resurrection, he met the disciples at the beach again. And again, in the same environment, Jesus said, please throw the net in the right side of the boat. And then they discover it's him. And then Peter puts his clothes on and goes to see his master. And then Jesus is ready with fish, to eat. And then Jesus asked a question 3 times to Peter. Peter, do you love me? And do you remember that he already betrayed Jesus? He already heard the cock. And then he already was conscious that he was not being a real disciple committed to Jesus. He was in fact denying Jesus Christ for 3 times. So he denied Jesus for 3 times. Now for 3 times again, Jesus asked him, do you love me? And he says, yes, I love you. Do you love me? Yes, you know I love me. And then for the 3rd time, Peter was already, hurt by that question. And then Jesus answered the 3 times, feed my sheep. So you see, when we are transformed with one purpose, to feed the sheep. Now, I remember meeting someone who was a boy, and he's here with me studying, and that's the wonderful story I have to tell everyone. This boy was in the streets in Niger, and he was looking for food, and he joined the Pathfinders Club. Later on, he baptized, and then there was a transformation in his life. He was a Muslim, and then we found a place for him to study in Brazil. So he graduated from theology in Brazil, and today he's studying a master's degree here in IAS. And it's wonderful to see how Jesus changed the life of this boy. For now 15 years, 16 years, we know him. And how his character, even his personality, his goals in life, everything changed. And as I said before, there's no end in this transformation. It's a constant And this is wonderful to see this happening. And this changes ourselves as well. I feel myself empowered when I see people being changed by the wonderful love of Jesus.
I think a way to reflect the love of Christ is through serving. And as my time as a volunteer, I had some experiences. Like when I was in the United States, there was a time when we went to a meeting in the fire department with all the neighborhood, and we had a time to talk to them, have a little chat, and meet with them. So we were talking to them how we left our countries to go to serve in another country, and for free, and just to work and help. And they were like, oh really, that's interesting, because no one does that. So they were interested to know why we do that. So that's a point when we can share the love of Christ. And the other time when I was in Paraguay, also serving as a volunteer for ADRA, we had an opportunity to help some people there. And you can also see how amazed they are, because you are helping them, and they go like, thank you so much. You don't know how much you're helping us, and some things like that, So you don't have those people. So when you help them, they wonder why you are doing that. So this is a way to show the love of Christ.
Yes, it's beautiful how you started mentioning about how once we encounter God's love and we really understand it, we begin to be ambassadors of this love. And then naturally, we're more able to share what we have experienced. And I would like to invite Hadassa now for us to reflect a little bit on the story of the first missionaries that Jesus sent. And they had been madmen. They had been demoniacs within a few hours before that. And Jesus went there and completely transformed their lives. But these men, they did not have so much theological knowledge. They had not been to the seminary. They did not have, so much practice. They had not been walking with Jesus as the disciples had. So what do you think was the most powerful thing about their testimony, and why did Jesus believe that they were ready to share what they had experienced?
Well, because they were transformed, right? Because first God healed them. That's really, so that's what they were expecting. So they could see the power of Jesus. So they could feel, right? They could feel the power of Jesus. So they were ready to talk about this. So they had the experience in their lives. So that's about testify of God, right? We cannot testify if we don't experience anything, right? So what we will say would be just words, right? So this is very, very important. This is actually how make the difference for other people to listen, right? I remember when I was in my experience when I was going to Thailand, I was so excited. And of course, I was also worried because I don't have all the theology, the doctrines, but I have my experience. I have seen God's transformation in my life. I know what He can do for people since He has done for me. So that's what I'm gonna do, right? That's what I'm gonna do. So, and then I think that's what changed. I remember one pastor asked, I was in a meeting and they asked me, so if you go there, what are you really going to do? How are you going to serve people there? And I said, I don't know how the doors will be open for me, but I will just love people there,
Yeah.
Whatever they need, if they need me a service, if I have to go in their house, clean their house, if I have to help them with my time, I will help. So I think that's what I could do. That's the difference.
Yeah, definitely. I think I like two things that you have mentioned here. One is the fact that in the end, the best way to love somebody and to share about Jesus with other people is by serving them. I think this is very, very interesting. How it's not only about words, it's always much more than that. There is a tendency for us to stay in our comfort zones, and that's often just about talking about something. And then there's something else that you guys mentioned, and that is that when we talk and we share with our lives or our words, we're not sharing only our story, but it's our story that has been transformed by the story of Christ. So in the end, it is his story in our story. Yes, this story that Hadassa just commented on, this is very interesting in the Bible, because these people, they had a very dramatic transformation, I think, right? And it was right there in front of the eyes of the people, the community, and they could not deny the transformation that Christ had done in their lives. There is also a comment in the book, The Desire of Ages. It says that not one sermon from Jesus' lips had ever fallen upon their ears. So it wasn't because of those words. They could not instruct the people as the disciples who had been daily with Christ were able to, but they bore in their own persons the evidence that Jesus was the Messiah. I think in our days, more and more, especially the young people, they are looking for that kind of evidence in our lives that tell them that Jesus and his story and his power is actually real and can make a big difference. Now, question for Dr. Dioi. If somebody, a Christian, is not sure about his or her personal salvation in Jesus, that could affect the boldness of one's testimony and the way that that person goes about serving and witnessing to other people, right?
Yes, there are people, Christians, who are not motivated to share and to, they are afraid, they're full of guilt, full of self-condemnation. They are perfectionists. They sometimes don't understand what is justification by faith. So understanding that makes a whole difference. And I always like to tell a very simple story to help people understand how we are saved. It's about a hunter. He is hunting in the middle of a forest, and then at the end of the afternoon, night comes and he gets lost. He cannot go back to the hut, the hunter's hut. And then he is afraid, but then he hears there is a horse passing by. And someone is riding the horse and he shouts, "Please help me, I'm lost. What's the way to the hut?" And then this horse rider says, "You just go and follow this big tree. At the side of the big tree, you can see in the shade, there's a way there, there's a path. Just follow that path to north and you'll get to the hut." Now, the hunter, he goes to that place, he finds the tree, he finds the path and starts walking. Now, he's walking the way, but he's not yet in the hut, but he's no longer lost. So he's not lost and he's not arrived yet. So this is our situation right now. When we walk with Jesus every day, we are walking the way. We are not lost. We are sure of salvation. We can be sure that we will get there if we stay in the way that Jesus told us to walk. So this is the only way to understand how we can really be sure have this assurance of salvation. One thing that's also interesting that we should understand that we should be story hunters. And that's why young people have this, strength to go and give testimony and tell stories and do things, go to Thailand, go everywhere, to Paraguay, go everywhere, to the worst place in the world. They are looking for stories. And I like to repeat a colleague of us who says, if you don't have a story to tell, you will end by be just a footnote of someone else's story. In other words, you'll be just nothing, And unfortunately, there are many Christians living a very nominal type of life, just a theoretical thing, a conceptual understanding of Jesus and his teaching. We should have an experience, and especially those who are born Christians, Seventh-day Adventists, or any other Christian religion, we should look for those experiences, look for stories. So place yourself in situations where stories will happen, and then transformation will go faster, and you will be more assured of your salvation every day.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Pastor. And also the study guide finishes with that message that whatever our story may turn out to be when we put our lives in God's hand, it is mostly about what Jesus has done. So even though we may not have a very dramatic testimony or something that happens in our lives like what happened to the demoniacs, we can see him doing wonderful things through us if we only allow ourselves to follow the path that he has shown. And if we're willing to let what he has done, biggest sacrifice ever, it's not about sacrifices that we make, even though we may be called for them, and then we'll be able to live wonderful things. But it's mostly about his sacrifice, and we can trust fully in that, and we can rest in what he has already done. Unfortunately, we have to finish, but it was wonderful talking to you guys. And before the end, we would like to invite you to say Happy Sabbath in a language of your choice. We have established a tradition of learning how to say Happy Sabbath in different languages. And I'll invite Hadassa to start.
Okay, so I speak in Thailandese. Suksan wan sabato.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Joy?
Yes, in Bahasa from Indonesia, Salamat Sabat.
Nice, thank you. Lucas?
I just know in Spanish and English, so I asked a friend here to teach me how to say it in Guarani, which is a language used in Paraguay, and she taught me right now. So it is apave arapocoimpe.
Okay, nice. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode, and thank you for you all listening. And we'll see you next week. Have a happy Sabbath.